Great Lakes? More like making me greatly terrified of large bodies of water and the surrounding wilderness. The Great Lakes of North America might be a beautiful and fun place to visit, but creeps both natural and supernatural might just make your visit a living nightmare. Enjoy these allegedly true and scary Great Lakes stories, and don't forget to send me your scary stories so I can narrate them. I'm looking for scary motel stories and creepy things seen at hot springs. Just post your stories at darkstories.org. However, if you have a terrifying workplace story, send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit instead, so I can possibly have it narrated for a new podcast. If you want more terror between episodes, don't forget to check eeriecast.com for more scary shows like this one. Now, let's begin. My 7th birthday. From Anonymous. I'm from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, really right next to Lake Superior. You could probably guess back in 1991 there really wasn't much crime there. My parents, as well as other parents, always let their children wander either alone or in groups. I was born in June, and so every summer my birthdays were always outside, at the beach, or barbecue-type parties that usually lasted all day. That year, my 7th birthday was no different from the others. That was the year we decided we'd go to the next town over, just a couple miles away, to a place called Alqual Recreation Area. It was off the highway a bit with an elementary school on the same property. It's a big place. There were lots of trees to climb, trails to walk, and a big pavilion you could use for parties. Lots of playground equipment too, that was older, but was still considered safe to use and fun. There was a small paved kind of wide bike path that wound around the whole place. It was a favorite place to go for sure. While my parents were setting up at the pavilion, some family were just starting to arrive. I could tell my brother was getting tired of playing with his little sister, so I asked my mom if it was alright if I just sort of walked down the bike path a ways, just a bit over the hill. Sure, just stay close where we can see you. I remember her saying that to me. Okay. And that was it. I left my brother to hang with the cousins, while I walked off on my own a bit. It was such a sunny, bright afternoon. There really was no darkness on the bike path. But I didn't see the white pickup truck parked on the bike path until I'd actually got to the bottom of the hill, out of my mom's sight. Why I kept walking towards it, I have no idea. I remember seeing that truck, an older type of truck, maybe a 60s style with a cap over the truck bed. I could see it over the roof of the truck as I was walking towards the front of it. There was a man I could see sitting on the bench that the truck was pulled up alongside. He looked like Santa to me, and he was whittling a piece of wood. I got pretty close and was going to turn around when I was surprised by a little girl. "Hi." She popped out from behind the truck and practically screamed it at me. The old man didn't even look up. I looked at him, and he just kept whittling. This little girl was so enthusiastic, and she was smiling. Now, this is a small town. Everyone looks fairly familiar, but I'd never seen this truck, nor these two people before. Still, I smiled back and said hi. I remember we had some unmemorable kid talk when she quickly said, "Oh, hey, want to see something great?" I answered, "Sure." The girl very excitedly started to tell me the grandfather, who was the whittler on the bench, had built her and her brother a little space in the back of the truck. She wanted me to see it. I was a pretty shy kid that got picked on a lot, and I think I was so desperate for a friend, I didn't even think about how I've never seen them before, or any other dangers or red flags. 7-year-old me was just happy to have a possible new friend. Maybe her family just moved there, and this would be my chance to have a friend this summer. She took me around the back of the truck, where the tailgate and the window to the cab were already open. We both climbed in. I went as far back on my hands and knees as I could in front of her. Somehow she had closed the tailgate and the window in one motion. I don't even know how she could have done this. She was so small and only seemed maybe a little bit older than me. I just stupidly shrugged it off. There was a bucket with crayons and pencils and a tiny table and a tiny set of chairs. I, for whatever reason, expected more. I said something along the lines of, "Oh, okay, this looks nice. Well, my mom is going to be looking for me, so I think I should get going." Then I started to reach for... Wait, I didn't know how to open this from the inside. The girl went from happy to a weird, creepy smile. She suddenly didn't look like a little girl anymore. I started to feel that uh-oh feeling you have when you know you screwed up. I tried to put my hands on the window of the truck topper, and every time I did this, the girl would laugh a really creepy laugh, swatting my hands away. I was really crying at this point, and I started to bang on a small side window on the topper to get the old man's attention. At that point, as the girl's laughing is growing, along with my panic, the old man proceeds to get up and put the stick in his pocket. I thought, great, he's going to get me out. But he didn't. He didn't go towards the back of the truck at all. He started walking around the front of it. I began to scream at the top of my lungs. This girl just kept laughing. I still remember her face as she laughed at me, telling me I could not leave. As I was sitting there gasping now and looking around frantically, I could hear my mom's voice. I jumped around the girl and quickly banged and screamed as loud as I could on the side of the topper. I could see my mother at the front of the truck talking to the man who didn't seem like he cared about much when she heard me. Thank goodness she did. She immediately walked around the back, letting me out of the truck. I jumped out and she grabbed me as the truck started, and this girl and old man drove away quickly. I really can't say what happened after that. I know my mom and dad calmed me down, and my dad and some uncles tried to follow the truck after my mom told everyone what happened. But nothing ever came of it. Nowadays, I'm always cautious of new places, and I'm always looking for an escape route just in case. I never get into cars with people I don't know. Looking back, maybe my 7-year-old brain just thought the girl looked like a little girl. Maybe she was just someone who aged really well, keeping her youth longer than others. Maybe she was just a young-looking woman. She was a bit taller than me. Why did the man not say anything? How did this girl get the tailgate closed so quickly and easily? Who knows if they would have been working together to take children? But I know without a doubt if my mom had not come looking for me, I would have been gone. This happened a few years ago. There's some background before we get to the lake part. I feel like everything before it is important. I was about 14 to 15 and we were going to a family campground in Michigan for a family reunion with my dad's side of the family. We do this every year. Drive a couple of hours, say hellos to family we haven't seen since last year, and get unpacked. Everything was normal this time around. We hung out and fished in the pond that was in front of the cabins. Soon it got dark and my sister and I, and a couple of my cousins, decided to walk around the pond to the playground. It wasn't that far, maybe a couple of 100 feet at most. It was within whistling distance, if that can be used as a unit of measurement. My dad's cousin, who we'll call C, likes to whistle at us to get us to come back to the cabins. A single note, high and sharp. It was dark and we were using the flashlights on our phones to see. We went down the slides, climbed the jungle gym thing, then my cousin, who we'll call B, decided that we should tell ghost stories. Random nonsense that we've heard and were repeating to each other, such as La Llorona, Bigfoot, skinwalkers, etc. Soon we walked back around the pond to the cabins, because we heard C whistle at us. We spent maybe an hour around the campfire before we were all off to bed. The cabins we were staying in had 2 rooms. Each room had a single window. The room where the door from the outside enters contains a mini fridge, a small table with 2 chairs, a microwave, and a fairly sized bed. I'm not sure how bed sizes work, so I'm just going to guess it was a queen size. The other room had 2 bunk beds. I woke up suddenly. I was sleeping on the top bunk. I'm not sure what time it was, as my phone was charging on the windowsill, but it was dark. I was lying on my side facing the wall. I didn't really notice what woke me at first. Everything seemed normal. That was until I noticed a pressure on my head above my ear. It felt like a hand was being slightly pressed down. I first thought that it was my sister, so I quickly raised my hand to try and grab who was touching me. My hand hit empty air. I sat up and turned to see if my sister was standing there, but she was sleeping on the other top bunk across the room. There was no way she could have gotten from beside my bunk bed to up on hers without making any noise. I slowly laid back down, looking around the room, but seeing nothing besides our suitcases on the floor. I wasn't about to get up to look in the bunk under mine, so I just stayed there. I'm not sure when I fell back to sleep, but soon it was morning. Throughout the morning, everything was fine until around maybe 1 or 2 p.m. I started getting a headache on the side of my head, above my ear. I took some Tylenol and everything went back to normal, and I went swimming. Now, this is where the title of the story comes in. We were in the pond. There was a floating dock in the middle, and we were jumping from it. I had jumped a few seconds ago myself, and was now watching my cousins jump in before I climbed back up the dock. It happened suddenly. 2 hands came down on the top of my head, shoving me under, but not holding. I came up slightly, sputtering and wiping water from my eyes. No one was near me. No one was close enough to have shoved me under. No one saw anything either. I did not feel okay with swimming more after that, so I just swam back to shore. We're going back to that campground this summer, and nothing more ever happened on that day or since. Hopefully, it stays that way. Wendigo Encounter, from Rissa. I'm a 16-year-old girl. This story happened around November of last year, as of writing this, at my grandparents' house in upstate New York. Behind their house is farmland, and behind that are many acres of thick woods. There are several trails that have been created through these woods for walking or four-wheeling. I've been going on these trails all my life, and I've never truly felt that there is anything to be afraid of out there. On the day this story takes place, we were at my grandparents' house to celebrate my aunt's birthday. Anytime we visit there, my cousins and I always go into the woods to hang out and talk. On this occasion, it was just me and one of my cousins, Grace. As we reached the tree line, everything felt normal. However, when we were probably half a mile into the trail, something felt off. My instincts were telling me something was wrong. It felt different than the usual paranoia I mentioned earlier. It felt like I had a real reason to be afraid. I didn't mention anything to Grace about this feeling, because she would probably just call me paranoid. As we kept walking, the feeling didn't ebb. Further into our walk, I swear I heard movement within the trees. I started to feel like we were being watched. Alarm bells were going off in my head. I was about to tell Grace that I think we should turn back, but her attention was focused on one side of the trail and the trees. She stopped walking and said, "What is that?" while pointing into the trees. I tried to see what she was seeing, but I told her that I couldn't see anything. Grace is taller than me, so perhaps she had a better view than I did. "There's a deer over there," she explained, slowly creeping into the trees, trying to stay quiet. I told her that I think we should go, because I was still freaked out. She replied, telling me to stop talking so I wouldn't scare the deer away. I could barely see her as she made her way closer to the supposed deer that I couldn't see. I was looking around myself, because Grace's absence made me feel even more scared. But then I heard her scream. My heart sank in my chest. After that was the approaching sound of her moving and breaking branches as she ran back toward the trail. She came into view not too long after, and I could finally see what she saw, and it wasn't a deer. It was this extremely pale, humanoid creature. It had the head of a deer, and it was pursuing her. I was frozen in place until Grace returned to the trail and she screamed for me to run, breaking my paralysis. I didn't dare look behind me. Together, we ran away from this creature, but I could still hear it chasing us. We managed to break through the trees into the field without it catching us. After that, I could no longer hear it until we made it to the house. I believe what Grace and I encountered that day was a Wendigo. It fits the physical description, and we were in the Great Lakes region, which is where they're said to exist. And if that's the case, I know it could have caught us and killed us if it wanted to. And I still wonder why it didn't. Grace and I have tried to tell our other cousins about what we saw as a sort of warning, but understandably they don't believe us. I hope they never have to experience what we did. One thing's for sure, I'll never return to those woods. Creature in the Water from MML 16. My fiancé and I rented an Airbnb on Lake Superior in Minnesota. It's a beautiful small cabin with a great view of Lake Superior. To get down to the lake, you have to go down a steep hill with stairs going down it. The first night went smooth. We had a fire on the beach until about midnight. When we were heading back, about to go back up the stairs, I heard a big splash in the water. I couldn't see anything because of how dark it was, but I had a bad, creepy feeling coming over me. My fiancé just said it's most likely a fish that jumped out. The next morning, we went back down to the beach to go kayaking on the lake, but when we got down there, everything was thrown around and messed with. The little storage garage was opened, and the paddles for the kayaks were broken. I noticed footprints in the sand going into the water. If you've never been to Lake Superior, it's extremely cold, and after a couple of minutes, your body gets completely frozen while swimming in it. I was confused as to why a person would do this. Was it a prank or something else? We got new paddles and went kayaking on the lake. It was fun until something big began hitting our kayaks. I was freaking out, and my fiancé just said it's a big fish, most likely, chasing little fish. I tried to believe him and tried to calm down until I saw this shadow in the water. This wasn't a normal shadow for a fish, because it was more human in shape. I'm sure my fiancé saw it too, because I heard him say, "What the heck?" Then his kayak got hit really hard. He was nearly flipped into the water. He looked at me and said, "Paddle, fast, get to the shore." We were about 1.5 miles off of shore, but we made it back to shore pretty quickly. Back on shore, my fiancé looked at me and said, "We're not going back in that water. We aren't having a fire tonight either. We're staying inside for the rest of the day." I asked him what he saw, but he said I don't want to know. Later that night, about 1 a.m, I woke up to go use the bathroom. The bathroom is next to the kitchen/living room, and in the living room, there's huge windows that look out over the lake. After I went to the bathroom, I went to the couch and looked out the window. It was a pretty quiet night. After about 5 minutes of watching, I heard something walking around outside. It sounded like it was walking on 2 legs and breathing heavily, like it just got done running for a while. That's when I got a bad feeling, but I just had to check it out. I wanted to know for sure what it was, so I went over to the front door to look out of it. I was looking around until I spotted it. It was next to our car, looking right at me. It had yellowish white eyes, and it looked to be at least 7 feet tall. I couldn't see much more because it was so dark. I was staring at this thing for a while. It was like we were having a staring contest. Then I heard this thing speak to me. It said my name in my fiance's voice, and it began to come closer to the door, repeating my name. My actual fiancé must have been up, because while I was backing up, I ran into him, scaring the crap out of me even more. He whispered to me, "I saw those eyes looking up at me in the water today." He continued, "Get in the bathroom, now. We're leaving as soon as the sun comes up tomorrow." We stayed in the bathroom all night, and we didn't sleep because this thing was walking around the cabin all night, repeatedly saying my name, banging and scratching at the cabin walls. Finally, it stopped around 3:30 to 4 in the morning. When the sun came up, we packed up everything and we went outside. The cabin had big scratch marks all over it. Our car had dents and scratches as well. My fiancé was mad, but he didn't want to stick around much longer. A couple months later, I saw on Facebook that that cabin had burned down and the owner sold the property. It makes me wonder if the owner knew what was in the water. All I know is I'm not staying in a cabin on Lake Superior again. We were followed. From Anonymous. My family and I took a vacation to visit some relatives 3 hours away from our city. It's a tradition we do every year in July or August. They live in a house along one of the Great Lakes. That means their house is about 30 minutes or so away from their city. I'll also note that my relatives own their own store in town, which they go to every weekday. One of the days we were visiting, my parents, my brother, and I decided to go check out their shop, since they recently relocated buildings due to owning multiple ones. When we arrived, we had to park at the back of the building in an alleyway. The building is on a street corner, so there's a road that runs along the front of the store and no parking lot because of the multiple other buildings around and attached buildings. I'm not too great at explaining things, so bear with me. We turned left to pull into the alleyway and parked beside my great-uncle's truck at the direct back of the building. As we were getting out, my 86-year-old great-grandmother pulled into the alleyway as well to visit my great-uncle at the store, something she does every day. We were happy to see her, so we slowed down our walking as she pulled into a spot. At that moment, I noticed a girl come out from one of the back doors of one of the houses in the alleyway. She was a native girl with a shaved head, and she was as big as my dad, who was around 250 to 300 pounds. He's a big guy. She appeared to be mumbling to herself and kicked at the ground. I assumed maybe she had an argument with someone and was just letting off some steam. We started walking down the alley to where we pulled in, because in order to get to the front of the store, you have to go back to where you pulled in, turn left, then turn left again where the storefronts are. At this point, the lady was now walking towards us, screaming gibberish at the top of her lungs, stumbling a bit. I was caught off guard. I kid you not, it was complete gibberish. My brother was rounding the corner out of the alleyway. I was walking beside my mom, and we were giving each other weird, nervous glances. My dad was farther back near the woman, and my great-grandmother was exiting her car. My mom and I slowed down to just let this woman pass us, but it was clear she was headed for us. We continued walking, picking up pace a little bit. She ended up getting extremely close to my mom and I, and we were almost pressed up against the brick wall walking. She was still screaming in gibberish. My dad picked up his pace behind us and yelled, "Keep your distance, please," to this wacko. Then she turned around and started right for my dad. My mom and I walked faster, rounding a corner. We caught up with my brother, then rounded the next corner to the storefronts. Now this woman was walking directly beside my father, still screaming in gibberish. I turned around to see that, and I noticed that she wasn't wearing shoes. I also noticed my dad had a really annoyed face. I turned back around then. My mom, my brother, and I began to laugh nervously. We reached the front of the store finally and hurried inside to see my great-uncle talking to a customer. I was expecting this crazy woman to follow us inside and for something worse to happen. But when my dad entered, she looked in the store and decided to continue down the road. A little frightened, we all had a good laugh about it, but I was trembling. For all we knew, that girl could have had a knife or something worse. She could have done some real damage considering her size, too. Personally, I think she was on something, but my dad seems to think that she just had mental problems. But heck, maybe it was both. After all, that area of town where the store wasn't the best part of town. My great-uncle told us that one of the houses in that alleyway is a substance den, censoring that for YouTube, and I think this encounter confirmed it. My dad admitted to my mom and I that he got really nervous too when she started coming near us, so that's why he yelled to get her attention on him. He wanted to keep her away from us, but just ignored her also. Just then, my great-grandmother, who wasn't anywhere around for any of this, came into the room from one of the back rooms. "Where were you?" my mom asked. "I came in through the back door," she replied. There was a back door the entire time. We didn't know about it, and we could have avoided all of this. That was one of the funniest, weirdest, and creepiest encounters with a stranger in my life. As for that seemingly deranged person, let's never meet again. Fear on Black Beach, Minnesota. From MNBL. This happened a few years ago. It still haunts me and my dad. It was in August or September. I became an apprentice to my dad, who's a professional photographer. We got a call from a model that wanted to take pictures up on the North Shore. That following week, we met with her and drove up to Silver Bay. To those unfamiliar with Silver Bay, there are stories surrounding it of shipwrecks and odd things that happen in that area. My father and I believe ourselves to be empaths. This will be relevant later on. That day we got to Black Beach at 8 p.m. We started our photo shoot a few hours later. Seemingly out of nowhere, I got this sharp pain on the right side of my head. Then I saw a vision of a sailor's death. My father noticed something was wrong with me. Even the model seemed to notice how heavy the atmosphere had gotten. Then suddenly there was the sound of a cannon firing off. That was followed shortly after by the sound of a screaming man in the distance. That wasn't all. There was another sound, like coyotes or something howling and running towards us, but we couldn't see them. As we left the beach, I remember seeing that same sailor walking on my left side, and on the right side of his head was wooden shrapnel. I couldn't budge this feeling like we were supposed to get out, like something wanted us to leave. So we piled into the truck, and as we drove off, both me and my dad saw multiple sailors standing on the edge of the woods. Even after 6 years, the both of us still wonder if they were helping or they were the cause of that deep fear that we felt that night. That brings us to the end of this episode of Darkness Prevails. More terrifying stories are on the way soon, so subscribe and smash that like button. By the way, did you know this show is available as a podcast called Unexplained Encounters? Just search for, follow, and rate Unexplained Encounters on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. This show is part of the EerieCast network. Go to EerieCast.com for more scary podcasts, such as Freaky Folklore, which explores your favorite monsters, myths, and mysteries, as well as Redwood Bureau, a fictional horror podcast about an agent on the run from an evil secret organization that captures supernatural creatures and entities. Well, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.